From the Middle is a founding member of the Odd Pods Media Network.
Oh, for the love. Sorry, just clearing my Mountain Dew hole.
I got my phone hole cleaned today.
That's where you keep it? You're so cerebral and you're so developed and evolved.
From the Middle after dark over here. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to episode 76 of From the Middle. We are three middle-class guys living in the middle of America in the middle chapters of our lives with a point of view that's somewhere in the middle. And we have another guest that's also from the middle, stayed up north, but still from the middle. Very excited to have our podcast friend, Russ.
Say it.
I don't need to say it. He can say it if he wants to say it. I don't have to say it. This is the whole thing that I don't have to do it if I don't want to. This is my podcast too. 25%, it's 33% right now.
I'm thoroughly confused right now. Hey, this is Russ, just north of Detroit, Michigan. I'm not sure exactly what's being argued on, but I can help argue it, I guess, one way or the other.
In Michigan, it's a swear word where we live.
Yeah.
It's the whole that.
Oh, we're losing Dylan.
We're losing Dylan already.
We're losing Dylan already.
Good friend Russ from the Infectious group.
Well, okay, he's gone.
Am I back?
Oh, there you
You're
go.
back.
There you go. We're back.
Okay.
We're back.
Off to a good start. Technical difficulties and confusing our guest right at the top.
Sweet.
So down here in Michigan.
On every Friday night we have friends over to Spin Records, and I have one friend who's like, he's from the middle, the dead center of Michigan, but he's the world's biggest Ohio State fan. Yeah. And then everybody else in the room is all Michigan fans, and I don't care one way or the other. So literally the one guy will sit on all the way on the opposite side of the table from the other two guys. And then every so often they'll bring it up and argue. So like, I know the argument, I just don't care one way or the other.
Yeah. So down here in Michigan's Kentucky.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And my favorite kind of guest from Michigan is one that doesn't care about Michigan football. So
yeah. Well, then you're looking at him.
Beautiful. Well, thanks for hopping on. You are from the Infectious Groove podcast. You have some co-hosts, Michelle and Kyle, but I wanted to give a little bit of background because everyone should definitely check out your show, and we want to give you a chance to plug that. But we had actually bumped into you, for anybody that's listened back to our pod Mashup with Grief Burrito episode, very similar kind of introduction. The podcasting community is really, really cool on Twitter. I found way more so than any other social network. And we bumped into you back then on Twitter, just kind of podcast recommendations and checking out other shows. And you guys had a really great show. And then by chance, you ended up being a founding member of the Odd Pods Media Network as well. Hopping in with some of the other shows, which was very exciting. When I heard Infectious Groove name come up, that was exciting for me at least. So that was kind of the introduction of how we met. And you guys have a killer music podcast. Like it's niche in all the right ways, but broad enough that literally anyone can jump into it and enjoy. And so it was so great to hear you guys were joining the network as well, and great to have you on, man. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Hey, no problem. I am real excited to be a part of the network, and the show. It's funny. The show itself, all of the compliments that we get are the tail end of a very long journey from me being a music snob. Like I used to absolutely be that guy that would say, oh, you're a fan of that band. Well, name 4 songs, now who cares, or, I would launch into a big diatribe about why whatever you listen to is terrible and whatever I listen to is great. Or, or the, oh, you don't know who produced that album or, who wrote that song or what. And I'm not that guy anymore. So in the process of growing out of it now on the show, what I do a lot is instead of taking things for granted, I'll back it up and say that, like, not everyone knows that this happened at that VMAs or this person produced that or whatever. So I'll back it up and say like, hey, just so anybody, knows, because I don't want anybody to listen to it and go, well, this is over my head, Right. Whereas if I started this even 5 years ago, that would have been the totally wrong intent. I would have been like, I'm out to prove I know more than everybody else, you know. It's just there's no point in that. And then the other thing that we try and do is we try and keep it all positive. There's so much on it. Like, you can throw a rock and hit a website that's got the 10 most overrated movies of all time, the 10 most overrated albums of all time, or, you know, remember when this song was big? Oh, what a terrible song. It's like, I'd rather talk about songs that are underrated, albums that are underrated, you know, things more people should hear. You know, it's not to say I won't shy away from if I don't like something or whatever, but there's no point in just, you know, telling, you know, if a song sold 10 million copies, it's not my place to tell 10 million people they're wrong. You know, right. It was obviously liked by people at one point. So that's just a little bit about what we do and how we do it. And I think all the compliments that we've got so far are all because we're trying to keep it more positive and more accessible.
Yeah. I think I'm so glad you said that, because it's not something that I would have just overtly said about the show as like the next line of complimenting what you guys do, but I certainly felt that. And I think we've to a degree, you know, tried to make an effort to keep the same kind of tone. Like, there's plenty of people just trying to be funny, knocking things on the internet. And so it's nice to have these little like bubbles where you can go and just enjoy something and you're not an idiot.
Right.
And it doesn't mean we don't disagree. It doesn't mean, you know, there aren't things that we don't like or whatever, but yeah, it's just such a unique aspect of your show that I jumped in and at no point felt like I didn't belong, you know, as a listener. And so I'm glad that you said that, because it's definitely a great part of your whole thing that you guys do.
Right on. Well, we appreciate it. We're trying. Michelle and I have known each other for right around 18 years, and when we agree, it's wonderful, and when we don't, it gets ugly real quick. And I hope that like our dry sense of humor and you know, the way we take shots at each other comes across on the show. I sometimes do wonder if people are like, man, that guy is just so mean to that woman, or, you know, like, oh, why is that woman even, you know, on that show with him, you know? But I think that comes across as well.
Yeah. You guys are like a perfect mix of that kind of like playful music, local radio station, like, and I think everyone gets it. Like I think it feels playful. Well, tell us a little bit too about Michelle and Kyle. They weren't able to hop on tonight, but they're certainly a part of the cast.
Yeah. Michelle, I met when I was surprise, managing a media play. And, you know, just working retail like everybody else. And she was just one of the cashiers. And there was two things that made me end up being friends with her. One, if you listen to the show, she's whip smart. She's really, really, really witty. And as much as I say, I hope people don't think I'm picking on her, she's always right there with a you know, quick comeback. And that was number one. And number two, I don't think I've ever met a person more individual and who stands by exactly what they believe in than her. To give you an idea, we did an album tournament back in season one, like right when the lockdown started. We thought, well, let's do something fun to give everybody extra episodes. And so Kyle picked 8 albums and I picked 8 albums, and we just put them in a like tournament bracket thing, and whatever came up against whatever, each episode, I would present an argument for an album and Kyle would present an argument for his album. Then Michelle would decide which album she liked better, and it would move on. And, you know, there were some that I thought were total fish in a barrel. I put The Dark Side of the Moon in there. I put Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. I put Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, things like that. And we had a week where Kyle brought this artist that I still have never heard of, like no one's ever heard of. And my album was Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, which is like internationally known as the greatest record ever made. Like when Paul McCartney tells you that this is the greatest record ever made. So I almost was like, earlier in the day, I was going to be like, so we don't even need to record this one, right? You know, like we can just say Pet Sounds moves on. But I didn't. And then we got to the end of the episode and I was like, so what's the verdict, Michelle? And I was literally like ready to just hit the buttons and wrap up the show. And she was like, oh, the other album. We were like, what? And she wasn't saying it to be, you know, to be ironic or, you know, oh, well, everybody loves Pet Sounds. She just genuinely liked that other record better than Pet Sounds. And she's not coming into it with having Rolling Stone sway her opinion or Paul McCartney sway her opinion. She's just her. and that like she likes that one record better than the other, and that's all there is to it, you know. So that's the biggest reason why I wanted to be friends with her, and it's worked out for the most part. There's been some issues through the years, but it's worked out for the most part. And then Kyle is her boyfriend, and what's great about Kyle is that he's one of those guys that said, oh, I thought I was into music until I met you guys. And so he's like trying to learn from us, but it's interesting because his mind is so much more open than Michelle and I's is, because in some ways, as an individual as she is, we're kind of a collective. We've gone to tons of the same shows together for the past, 15 years or so. And she's turned me onto a bunch of artists, and I've turned her onto a bunch of artists. So we're more similar than different. And Kyle is just now hearing about all of this stuff that we've been into, and then he turns us on to all the stuff we've never even heard of. So it makes for a good mix between the three of us.
Cool. So one thing, and you've talked about quite a bit, is that the accessibility that you guys have sort of curated with intent. And in your first episode, you talk about that quite a bit, and how music should be something that is accessible and something that you want to share with the world. Like, why would I want to be snobbish and try to because there's a greedy attitude that comes along with that too. Like, this is mine, not yours. And then just changing that character of you to say, instead of being greedy, I want to share. Mm-hmm. And it's something that you've been trying to do since day one, and then it's carried all the way through the episodes. When you go into wanting to create a podcast, it seems to me that you had a relatively clear vision, a picture in your mind on what you wanted it to be, on how you wanted it to be perceived by others. Versus our approach, which was, let's just start, let's hit the red button on a recording device and start talking, and then we're still figuring it out. So for you, looking back on that first episode, on those intentions to where you are now, obviously that accessibility component of it, that we want to share something with you component of it, has maintained. Are there things that you're seeing now, that you're talking about now, that you didn't realize were going to be part of the podcast, or has sort of some of the peripherals of the podcast kind of shifted and surprised you or anything?
By necessity, yes, because of the pandemic that came up. I thought that we would, in our first year, be talking about, oh, we just went to this tour, or I can't wait for the show that's coming, or I've been listening to a ton of this because, we have tickets for that. And then nothing happened. And so there's that. But then also we found that, because there's tons of places on the internet to go for whatever political discussion you're looking for. And I didn't want, the only time I wanted to skirt that is when we're talking about a John Lennon or a Roger Waters or an artist who is, political. And we're going to get into discussion about their art as it relates to politics, right? Mm-hmm. But we found, even on our latest episode, we end up having to skirt politics more often than not, because of how everything to do with the lockdown and the music industry hoping to someday get back to anywhere near where it was, has a lot to do with where people stand politically and legislation that may or may not come down. Like, we just, this latest episode, we spent a solid 20 minutes talking about the new thing that Live Nation and Ticketmaster are talking about doing, where you need to prove that you don't have the virus or possibly get a vaccination before you're allowed to go to a show. And that's not something I ever dreamed we'd be talking about, like, on the show, like people's personal thoughts on vaccinations or whatever, or giving a corporation your health records or whatever. My thought was, hey, Roger Waters is coming, let's talk about Pink Floyd for a little bit, like that was what I thought we were going to do. So we're trying to adapt to it, because again, there's so much of that out there. If you want, if you're right leaning, you can listen. There's a million places where you can find people who are going to talk in a way that you want to hear. And if you're left leaning, there's a million places you can find where people are going to, say what you want to hear there. So we're just trying to find a way to navigate that right now without getting into a whole political discussion, because there's so much of that elsewhere. You can get it anywhere else. I really want our show to stay, in the middle on that and just say, here's what we think about this. So that definitely is something that came up that we had no idea what to do. And there's no end in sight. So we're still just trying to navigate those waters right now.
I love too the heartbeat behind, and I've listened to a handful of your episodes over the last week. Just the heartbeat of like, and Kendall touched on it in the context of his question, you going from recovering music know-it-all to a guy who just genuinely loves music and wants to share it with people. I don't think that's happening today like it once did, where people said, hey, have you heard this? Hey, have you heard this? Even in the handful of episodes I've listened to, I would pause. And like you said, your hope would be that your listeners just pause and listen to a song or an album as you're talking about it and then come back. I did that with George Ezra and Sturgill Simpson, and Sturgill Simpson I was already aware of and fell in love with immediately. But I just love that you just want to be a beacon of, hey, have you heard this? And a huge variety of genres and years. And I just love that heartbeat behind what you guys are doing. And so my point is that you're clearly very knowledgeable about what you're talking about, but that's never a barrier to entry for somebody who, I don't like this genre of music. And you would say, hey, well, have you heard this guy, right? Or the people that say there's nothing good in rock these days. And you would say, hey, have you heard of this guy, right?
Yeah.
So that's just a really fun layer to it. Again, you're clearly knowledgeable, but I feel like I can listen whether I know much about music or not. And I'm going to find something that I like.
That's awesome. Yeah. And again, like I know you said it a couple of times, but I can't stress enough the recovering music snob aspect of it. I spent if you would have caught me recommending Sturgill Simpson 10 years ago, it would have been belittling you for 10 minutes about how do you not know about this, and then playing it for you, and as if you're even going to be like, oh, thanks, like, thanks for that, whereas now, and it just that the Sturgill Simpson record I always recommend is the his third one, Sailor's Guide to Earth.
Yeah.
Just last Friday we had somebody here who someone said to someone else in the room, did you see what Sturgill Simpson posted on Instagram? And somebody else in the room said, oh, I always hear that name, but I've never heard any of his music. And it was like to the Batcave, like somebody ran right over and grabbed the record. And I didn't need to do the whole 10-minute, make you feel bad because you've never heard his music. We just threw it on, and she's a mom. And that record is a concept country record about having your first child. And so she was like almost in tears 3 songs into it, and that moment doesn't happen if I'm a jerk, like it just doesn't happen.
Do you mean people don't like Stern talking down to about,
you're never going to believe this, but that's what I've learned. Yeah. I've learned that.
I've heard it said, and I've used it before, that there's no more divisive topic in the world than music genres. That I mean, if you could be somebody's best friend and instantly sever a relationship because you insulted a band they like.
Yeah, I feel like, in my defense, I did go to the School of Hard Knocks a little bit with that, because I got into Pink Floyd at a very, very early age. Well, I guess early for like most people, Pink Floyd is like a late teens, early 20s thing. And by way of a very long story, I got into Floyd around age 11, and that was right in the middle of their big, huge legal battle with Roger Waters, who left the band. And then there was the 3 other guys. And when I was coming up, it was like any older person I talked to about Pink Floyd, the first thing you had to get to was a stern talking down to about like whose side you take, Roger or, the other 3. And so I kind of spent like, I don't know, most of the 90s arguing with people about that before I was like, well, that doesn't matter at all. Like, I don't have any vested interest in this. Like, I'm not getting paid no matter who wins this, and nowadays I'm the kind of guy that can look back where in the 90s you had Roger put out a record in 92, the other guys put out a record in 94. That's essentially 2 Pink Floyd records that you have, that you wouldn't have had if they were all together or whatever. And now I look back at it like that instead of sitting there trying to argue over which one's better, you know?
Yeah. It's like, why does this have to matter? Why
Turns
does
out if the lawyers aren't cutting you a check, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Just enjoy the music.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, it's something that's so trivial. Like I feel like now this could be taken a couple of different ways, because this isn't necessarily a good thing. What I'm about to say is that I feel like fans internalize and the right song that brings you to tears is so personal to you. It becomes a sacred thing, this music that you're hearing. And then like you hear how record labels and businesses are, like Taylor Swift's master tracks for like her first handful of albums just sold for $300 billion or something stupid.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, and it's just think like being a Taylor Swift fan, like attaching yourself to those songs because you broke up with 15 boyfriends.
Yeah.
And those songs meant something to you. And then you're like, why are you just throwing these things around?
Yeah.
And so you really like the industry, like to them, it's just a game, right? So it's just it's such a trivial thing when you're talking about the master tracks and the business behind it. And I think it's good. It's good to obviously to have that feeling, that emotion, that attachment, and use music in such a way. It can be a very emotional thing, but at the same time, it's good to have some perspective and say, okay, well, maybe it's good that those things are supporting emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's good that those things support things that we go on in our life, but let's not pretend that those songs are life.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Kendall's really just trying to send a message to us about Star Wars, right? So you talked about Kyle coming in and saying, I thought I knew music until I met you guys. This is how Kendall felt about Star Wars. And you're talking about, do you take Roger's side or the other three? It's like the prequels and the original trilogy. I mean, the parallels are clear here. So Star Wars isn't life, but
I'm an apologist for being a middle-aged man who will admit to purchasing Taylor Swift's last album.
There's no shame in that. What's funny is I still haven't even heard Folklore, the latest from her, but I like a great deal of what she's done. I've seen her a couple times in concert. The only bad Taylor Swift experience I had personally was my wife and I went and saw her open for someone. This would have been back in like 2008, 2009 or something. And she was opening for someone here in Detroit. And then 2 nights later, she was playing a headlining show of her own on the west side of the state. And she was so good opening for who we went to see on like a Wednesday night that we were like, well, let's just grab tickets and go see her again, in a couple of days. So we grabbed tickets and we drove across the state. Now, I don't know how she does her business on a regular basis, but that particular tour, every single part of the show was exactly the same, down to like, after the first song, when she said thank you, like waiting exactly as long to do the Taylor Swift surprise face, like where their hand over, like
the surprise face was choreographed.
Like I literally every single moment of the show, like all of her gestures were exactly the same. That's the only real problem I've ever had with her. And, there are a handful of bands that I've seen several nights on the same tour. I've never seen that, but I'm sure a certain cross section of artists absolutely do that, just go through the motions when they get on stage. But that's really the only issue I've ever had with her. I mean, she writes lyrics that are universal, and, a lot of people can understand and put, you take a song like Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. The reason why that song is so popular is because there's so many people that can apply it to so many things in their lives. I know people that would never identify themselves as a Pink Floyd fan, but you bring that song up there. Oh, well, yeah, well, I love that song, and it's because it's so universal. So the more universal the message, the more it's going to appeal to everybody, Yeah, there's very few, it's almost a running joke on the show, but the only artist I absolutely will never have any love for whatsoever is the band Creed. they're just not my thing. And I'm also
closed shut.
I'm a recovering Creed hater. I used to just bring it up in public for no reason whatsoever, like long after they broke up. for, and now like if somebody else brings it up, I'm just like, oh, okay, that's cool for you. Like I don't have to give them a 15-minute lecture on how terrible Creed is, but that's really the only artist I've ever been that way about.
In my head, there was this scenario where you're at media play and somebody walks up to the Creed section and you walked over to intercept them and go, hold up.
Okay, so you joke, but that happened. That absolutely happened when, and I wish Michelle was here because you would be seeing her just shake her head. Yes. Because when Weathered came out, their last big record, I talked at least 15 dudes out of buying that record the first week that it came out. I was not having it. We had, of course you've been in these type of stores. They always have like the new release wall. I took it off the new release wall. Like I made people have to like actually ask us for it on the off chance that I would be there to swoop in and be like, let me help you. Like, let me help you, and yeah, I absolutely did that back then. Nowadays, I mean, I would never allow it in my own home, but I wouldn't talk you out of owning it anymore.
and that's how Russ destroyed media play. That's why.
yeah. For some reason, that location went out of business because they weren't selling new releases.
Now they're all gone. Huh?
It was crazy.
That's funny. Kendall leads worship at our church, and there was one week we were practicing, and I can't remember, Kendall, if it was you or I, but we started doing our best Scott Stapp impression.
You just got to replace all vowels with R's.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is the local Columbus, Ohio sports channel, 97.1 The Fan, one of the most common personality shows is Common Man and T-Bone. And one of those guys goes off on Scott Stapp all the time doing impersonations. It's so funny. I love the show. And he just has drilled into the ground this whole Scott Stapp joke that he's just such a huge fan.
Yeah, they're just not my thing at all.
Look, it's
a hatred that has lasted all these years too.
Yeah.
You're not on your own show. You're allowed to complain, man. If you want, just go for it. No one's
from now on, I'll just reference this episode. Whenever Creed comes up, I'll be like, you know what? Go listen to episode 76 from the middle. You'll hear all my thoughts. But it's funny when you say like holding a grudge about it. So there was back in like 97, 98, whenever Creed broke, there was this one guy that was telling me how they were going to be just the biggest legends of all time. And, just, oh man, you think Pink Floyd's a big deal. You think Van Halen's a big deal. Oh, we're 30 years from now, we're going to be talking about Creed, just like all those bands that you love. And I was just like, absolutely not. Easy 6 or 7 years later, my wife and I were walking through a mall and saw that guy across the mall, and he did like the whole like I think I know you kind of wave, and out loud across the mall I was like, how's that Creed thing going? He literally just looked at his girlfriend like, I'll explain it later.
And then he proceeded to never want to explain it later.
Yeah, I'm sure he was like, that was just some crazy guy.
So if we jump ahead or past, I don't know, it's late. If we jump back in time before the music pretension, where did the love of music start? Did we catch that with the 11-year-old listening to Pink Floyd, man? Like, how did that all start for you?
So it's a very odd thing that I'm very grateful for. So my mom and I were in a Perry drugstore, which, is not around anymore, but Walgreens, CVS, that type of thing. And back then, everywhere, including gas stations, sold at least cassettes and usually LPs. And we were at the checkout, and the little record section was like right near the checkout. And my mom just said, oh, if you want to grab a record, because there were like some Disney records and stuff on the end cap. Mm-hmm. And I was 3, and was right next to that was an Elvis live album called Elvis Live at Madison Square Garden. And on the cover, this dude looks 100,000 feet tall because, I'm 3 and the record's, 12-inch record. And he's, that's a good picture from like at the bottom of the stage. So the dude looks 100 feet tall and he's wearing a cape. So, yeah. I mean, looks like a superhero on the cover of this record. Yeah. Right. And so of course my mom's like, yes, she grew up on Elvis. There's a whole thing where, my mom actually got fired from her first job because she bought Elvis's debut record the week that it came out. And this was in the South, and they were just like, oh, we're not having that. Like, you can't buy that trash. And they fired her from her first job because she went on her lunch break to get an Elvis record. Yeah. So, anyways, I buy this record. I have no idea what's on it. I'm 3. I don't know who Elvis is or anything, but he looks like a superhero on the cover. And if you listen to that record, inside of the first 5 tracks, this cat covers. Well, I mean, he opens with "That's All Right, Mama," but then he does like Three Dog Night, the Righteous Brothers. Trying to think, Dusty Springfield, CCR. He covers Proud Mary. That's all in like the first 5 songs. Mm-hmm. And then he's bringing Hound Dogs in there and Suspicious Minds and all that, but he does like Willie Nelson stuff, like deep stuff, like For the Good Times, and things like that. Really, really deep love songs. And I just played that record to death because, again, to me, it was just there's this superhero on the cover. And then as I got older, I started to look back into the artist that he was covering. So now you have a 6 or 7-year-old who's looking deep into like CCR and Dusty Springfield and the Righteous Brothers, which normally wouldn't happen. You wouldn't have a 6 or 7-year-old even remotely interested in those artists, So I got turned on to all of that just from that one Elvis record. And then really the biggest turning point after that was when I was in like 5th grade, fourth or 5th grade. We had a kid move into the school from a totally different part of town, and he brought with him Raising Hell by Run DMC. And that broke open. I was like, wait, whoa, what? Because I had heard every other genre that had been out there. Rap had just been born, and I already knew of Aerosmith and whatnot. So then here's them doing Walk This Way in this completely different way that I'd never heard before. And I'd heard like they sample a lot of Zeppelin and the Knack and stuff like that on that record. And I was just blown away. I was, it's kind of, the only thing I can equate it to is if you were there, like around the time, like blues or jazz was born, like where this whole thing is happening at that time. So those 2 things happening are really what led to me being open to listening to pretty much anything going forward. And and the Elvis thing is such a stroke of luck that it happened.
Interesting. And then you had the dark media play days where the pretension levels grew. No, a joke, but I do assume that's where your catalog grew a ton. We saw some pictures. I don't know if we're allowed to share them from our page.
Yeah. Feel free.
But we saw some pictures of your studio at your house, man. That's pretty crazy. And I assume your collection grew a ton while you worked there.
Yeah, pretty much any sort of retail work at that time, even if you weren't at a media play or whatever, there was always a huge media section, and there was always free promos or whatever. Or worst case scenario back then, when albums flew off the shelves, when Eminem's second record came out and literally it was out of stock everywhere, stuff like that. Like we always got first crack at getting things, to make sure we had them and all that stuff. So yeah, it's been growing, and I've gone through different media and stuff. I had a huge CD collection at one time. Now I have a huge vinyl collection, and I'm not even that guy that wants to sit around and convince people that vinyl sounds better. I just like the medium as a whole better. Mm-hmm. So that's what I have here now. But yeah, it's there. Literally, I will buy and listen to give just about anything at least a chance. And I don't keep music around that I don't like. If I buy something and I don't like it, I will get rid of it. I don't keep it around just to collect it. But then also I am a completist, though there are some artists that I own their entire catalog when, I probably like, I don't know, most of it. It's probably the same thing as Star Wars. There's probably Star Wars movies that you own that you don't like, but you still have them because they're part of the collection. So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's
just to give a quick visual for the podcasters alone. What kind of number are we looking at vinyl?
I think just under 1,400, something like that. I think. Yeah, it's between 13, 15, 14, and that's for 12-inch records. I've got, I don't know, another couple hundred 7-inch records because I have stuff like Electric Avenue by Eddie Grant. You can't stream that song. You still can't stream that song. So I got to bust out the 7-inch and play that because I'm not buying the whole Eddie Grant record.
Russ is going to go count his vinyl, and we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from one of our friends in the Odd Pods Media Network. We'll be right back with Russ.
Welcome everybody to the Body Skew Podcast. I am...
Whoa, dude. No. This is our promo, not the show. I'm Rico.
Oh, sorry, I'm CJ, and we're the hosts of the Pot Askew podcast.
We're fans of pretty much anything and everything pop culture, including movies, TV shows, books, video games, comics, music, and of course, Kevin Smith. Now, while we do keep our fingers on the pulse of Silent Bob, he certainly doesn't need our help in promoting him.
You got that right. We do our own thing, with inspiration from the man himself and his mantra of why not. We've got stories about celebrities we've interviewed, theories of our own for certain movies, and we can usually tend to have a great debate about anything.
We also do commentaries on movies. Sometimes we ask our fans what they want to watch with us. So if you love the timbre of our vocal cords and want to watch a movie at the same time, give us a listen.
Stay tuned every Monday, there's always something new. And if you've been good this year, we may even give you a bonus episode from time to time.
So please be good and subscribe to and enjoy Pot Askew, founding member of the Odd Pods Media Network.
When dreaming, I'm guided to another world, time and time again.
So right before you went into that, I noticed that you changed your name on the screen to Scott Stapp, and I got to tell you that was soul stirring.
Are there times when no matter how much you're trying not to be that former self, you have to shove it down because it wants to just come back out?
No, and actually everyone I've ever met in my life sent me this link over the past week, because apparently the drummer from Creed has recently been going around saying that they're going to do a reunion. So like every person I've ever met has been like, oh, 2020 just got worse for you, you know? And I'm just like, whatever, like my big, I guess we'll continue on the Creed thing. My big problem with Creed back then was just like, the music they make is the music that they make, but you turn around twice and they're like on mountaintops in their videos and stuff. And I was like, dude, what you're singing about, it's not important, like at all, let alone a mountaintop, like what, and so the artsy fartsy side of me was all offended by that. Cause again, I was, I'm still a huge Pink Floyd fan, but at the time I was like knee deep in, I was near going to door with Pink Floyd records, being like, do you have a minute to talk about Pink Floyd? like as Floyd, there's a lot of real serious stuff. Like, I mean, Roger Waters has a record that came out in '92 called Amused to Death, that is probably the most serious and depressing record I've ever heard. And then I turn around twice and this guy's on a mountaintop singing about nothing, and I was just so offended.
If you're going to use the mountaintop, you better be Miley Cyrus talking about the climb. You know what I mean?
Right? Yeah. I mean, at least have the metaphor fit.
And I don't even mean about Creed. I just wonder if there are times when people come to you really excited about somebody and you just have to go, okay, count to 5.
Oh, it happens almost weekly on the show, because Kyle thinks that The Weeknd is the greatest thing that's ever happened to music. And how do I put this lightly? I do not. And so, there's just a lot of times, and again, if this was even 5 years ago, I would have had this desire to give him a lecture about, how little he must know because he thinks The Weeknd's so great. And now it's like, hey man, if that moves you, cool. Not everybody wants to sit around listening to Roger Waters sing about the literal end of the world. Right. I think it's totally okay for you to like what you like, so not anymore. I'm more or less over. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's things I'll definitely get passionate about, but as far as insulting anything else anybody else is liking, I'm good now. We just had a whole thing. Well, we just had a whole thing this last couple episodes where an episode or 2 ago, where we were talking about how like the three of us don't really get Ariana Grande at all. Like I just don't see what she brings to the table. And even then I'm like, I'm sure somebody loves it, and because she sells millions of records, and that's fine. And I'm not even saying that she's not good. She's just not excuse me, she's just not good for me.
Yeah. It does remind me, I used to work with this guy, huge classic rock fan, like just for months on end, just all things classic rock. And when the show Glee was popular and they were covering everything under the sun, I would play the Glee covers of these songs while I was working around him, just to see his reaction. And he was trying so hard. It was like Hank Hill getting mad, right? Like it only really goes so far. Like Hank Hill only gets so aggressive.
Yeah.
But he would start commenting on it and say whatever the name of the original drummer or whatever and I would go, who? I think this is Glee original. I just had to I just had to mess with him just a little bit. And it was such a good time when Glee was churning out all those covers, because
you could get them real good by having like the original come on the radio sometime and be like, oh, they're covering Glee.
Yeah. Oh, I did that plenty of times. Like, I think these guys stole this from Glee, man.
Oh boy.
It was so much fun just to troll them just a little bit.
I used to work with a guy who was just the biggest Pentatonics fan. Like if we any classic song that got brought up, he'd be like, have you heard the Pentatonics version? And I'd be like, have you heard the person who wrote it? And then in a striking move of just the biggest swipe of karma, my son, who is 14, went through this huge phase like 2 years ago where everything was Pentatonics. And I was like, I deserve this. Like, this is, I absolutely deserve this happening.
Yeah. It's possibly more impressive than singing a guitar part.
Yeah.
Maybe.
What is the is it the breakup with Vince Vaughn where they're having a dinner party and the guy's trying to show him how to do Owner of a Lonely Heart a cappella? Oh man, it's one of the best scene. There's no way to better express your love of music through the majesty of the human voice. That whole scene is worth watching that whole movie for.
It sounds like an Andy Bernard line, like all his stuff that he does with his Cornell a cappella singing group. I was curious. I wanted to ask you were talking about you'll buy the album. If you don't like an album, you'll get rid of it. Where are you in the streaming world? Will you try something out streaming like on Spotify or Apple Music first to kind of, because you alluded to not being records are better for audio quality snob. The natural progression of that person is I won't even listen to it first on streaming because it's so inferior.
Okay, so I don't think this is going to make me sound snobby, but there's certain artists where if they have a string of records that I love, then I'm just going to buy the album sight unseen or unheard rather, and with the expressed intent of getting the full experience. Like I will, for example, again, to bring him up again, the last Roger Waters solo LP came out like 2 years ago now, and I avoided like the YouTube posts from him, the Facebook posts from him, I think there was at least 3 singles on Spotify before the record came out, and I avoided all of that with the specific intent of getting the album and listening to it front to back instead of just hearing pieces of it. But there's been more than a few instances of people saying, oh, you should hear this artist, or somebody puts out a new record and I wait until I know for sure that I'm going to like it via streaming before I buy it, that type of thing. But yeah, the only time I'll really do that is if I know it's an artist that I'm going to like, then I'll just wait and buy it and listen to the whole record front to back. But I don't have any problem listening to anything on streaming. Like Wolfgang Van Halen just put out his first single today, and I've been waiting years to hear what he's going to do on his own. And it was really cool to hear that. Like I didn't wait for that whole record to come out just to hear, that song.
Yeah, that makes sense. It almost feels like, I think a bigger version of that is there's this movie. I've got to see the movie in the theater before. I don't want to see it on Netflix. I want to go experience IMAX, whatever, the seat shaking. Like I need that experience for this kind of movie. So it feels a little like that. I think that's certainly relatable.
Yeah, I think there's more. Sometimes that way, more like Pink Floyd has always been an album band. So with the Roger Waters thing, I was avoiding that because his records generally tell a story of some sort. So I didn't want to hear it like out of context. At least with a trailer, they just give you like little snippets of it. With this, it was like 3 full things that were out there that were part of this full thing. And again, like the Wolfgang Van Halen thing, he's not going to be putting out a concept record. You know what I mean? So it's okay if I hear parts of it ahead of time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Russ, I'm wondering if you're a believer in the idea that the type of music a person listens to or likes, nay, even loves, says a lot about them.
To an extent, but I have friends in my life that you would never, like, let me put it this way. I have a friend who is, I'm going to come off as that guy. I have a black friend. I have a friend who's black, and every person that I know that comes to our music night gatherings on Friday will instantly try to talk to him about rap, whether it's, Dre or Run DMC or who, a new artist or whatever. They will instantly try and talk to him about rap. Now, this guy knows more about the Eagles and the Beatles than I'll ever know in my entire lifetime, and can barely tolerate rap. So it's like, most people that look at him instantly want to get in a conversation about rap, and he's like, okay, but I'm going to see Marilyn Manson tomorrow night. Like, I don't even know who you're talking about. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
However, at the same time, there are, like, for example, I have historically been one of the moodiest people known to man, and that's your target audience for Pink Floyd. So it does. Some people do fall in. So it's hard to say.
Well, I thought it might be fun. I do want to come back to your music night, because I think that's one of the coolest ideas I've ever heard, where you guys get together and well, I'm not going to steal your thunder, so let's come back to that. But I thought it'd be fun to play a little game where the three of us tell you some of our top favorite artists, bands, musicians, and you just give us your reaction, or you can make some guesses, surmise a little bit about us as individuals.
Right on.
Do you guys want to volunteer? One of you want to volunteer?
I'll go first. I don't care.
Okay.
All right. Here's some. I won't call it the top 10 list, but this will give you enough. All right. So Michael Bublé,
Right on.
Frank Sinatra,
Mhm.
Nat King Cole, Bing Crosby. All right. Those are out of the way.
So you're 90. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, first of all, you look remarkable for a 100-year-old man.
You're just waiting for Michael Bolton and Josh Groban.
Yeah. I enjoy Kenny G from time to time.
I do actually enjoy Kenny G from time to time. But
He's not that progressive. Yeah.
look, circulatory breathing is impressive in the way that he uses it. Anyways, Gregory Porter. This name will be lost on most people. So it's an Italian pianist, Ludovico Einaudi, John Williams, Celtic Woman, John Legend, Sam Smith.
And what am I trying to guess here?
It's Corey's game.
Just your reaction, or what you might get. You don't know us from Adam, really. Other than
Tell us who you think. Someone gives you that list. Their name is Dylan. What do you think about Dylan?
I would definitely guess that you're a traditionalist. Because you didn't just say classical music, you said John Williams. And I know that ties into Star Wars. I know that, but you've got specific artists that you like that are from there. And I noticed that you mentioned Bublé and Sinatra, but not Harry Connick Jr., which I don't know if you're into Harry Connick Jr., but that to me suggests that you're more into that traditional style, whereas Harry Connick Jr., as soon as he had half of a hit, like, ran off in the pop direction. So that would be my guess about you, is that you're a very traditional type person.
Corey, is that accurate?
It's very accurate.
Yeah, I do like Harry Connick,
old
by the
soul,
way.
very chivalrous. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like Harry Connick, by the way, but some of his stuff gets a little more bluesy than I necessarily need a whole album of.
Yeah.
And so I like Harry Connick shuffled in a playlist, but I don't need a whole album of Harry Connick.
Yeah, I've got the first two, and I'm good after that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's great.
Kendall, you're up. We can't have the brothers back to back.
Okay. All right. So same deal. Rattle off a few. They're not in any kind of order, except for the first one is my favorite band of all time, which might be the most negatively telling thing about me. And that's Five Iron Frenzy. So they're numero uno. The rest in no kind of order: Green Day, Aerosmith, Project 86, if you're familiar.
Mm-mm.
They're drawing. Do you remember Drawing Black Lines?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a post-chord metal. Them. Blink 182, Matchbox 20, Garth Brooks. Recently, Hardy, the New Country fella.
Gotcha.
The Killers and Nirvana.
I would definitely say you pay attention to lyrics before anything else based on most of that list. Like, I would assume that melody is less important to you than the actual lyric and the meaning behind the song, just based on that list of artists. Like you take somebody like Garth didn't write any of his songs, but he can sure deliver it in a way to where you're like, I totally know what he means, you know?
Yeah.
And like Green Day, Green Day's a punk band, but they're a lyric band too. Like Billy Joe knows his way around writing a song that you can hear, and like a Wish You Were Here type song where like, how many people have played Time of Your Life at a birth or a death,
right?
You know what I mean? Like that's how universal that song is, you know? And so that would be my impression based on that list, is that you definitely listened for lyrics and meaning behind things before anything else. And probably, if as far as movies go, you're probably way more into dialogue and like not just throwing away lines, like plot lines mattering because of dialogue.
Kendall, would you say that's true for yourself?
I would say that's very fair.
What's behind you on those canvases?
Lyrics.
Right on. I'm 2 for 2. I'm so excited.
That was my introduction to like the band world. Being a part of that was being a lyricist.
Yeah, right on. Yeah.
Before I ever learned guitar or anything else, I was writing lyrics.
Lyrics matter to me more than anything, to the point where like my wife and Michelle and other people get mad when I say, well, I'm just angry that they rhymed that word with that word or whatever. And they're like, you don't have to pick it apart that much. I'm like, but I do though, but lyrics matter a great deal to me.
Yeah. Well, I tell people like, as long as you can tell the story, I tell people all the time, like when you're writing a song versus like trying to like stick to the strict fundamentals of some types of poetry, that like it's rhyming by its definition doesn't matter as much. Vowel sounds matter.
Right.
And if you can say a word differently to make it match, I'm okay with that. Like that doesn't bother me. Anyway.
Side note, Garth Brooks was the last concert that we got to go to before the lockdowns. We saw him in Ford Field here, and it was probably the 6th or 7th time I'd seen Garth, and Michelle famously fell asleep at a Garth Brooks show a couple of years ago, so she wasn't invited. But it was Kyle had never seen Garth before, and he had never been to a bigger show than like a 500 seater. So we go see Garth in a 70,000 seat place, and if you've ever seen Garth or footage of Garth makes everyone in a 70,000 seat place feel like you're in the front row. Yeah. And I seriously thought Kyle was going to cry the entire concert. Like he was just that connected to everything going on.
That's cool. I just saw Mark Rebier, the looper, the like internet looper on Your Mom's House podcast with Tom Segura and Christina Pajitsky, and they were hating on Garth. But isn't he doing like a during the COVID drive-in thing? But he's not even there. They're just playing the recorded video of it. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
And it's still going to sell out easily. Oh,
it's absolutely. Garth is so easy for people to hate on. And, again, look at the vinyl thing. If you look at the pricing of vinyl alone, there's bands with a straight face that put out one LP now that's like $35-40. Garth Brooks last year put out his music on vinyl for the first time ever, and it was 21 album set for $100. Like because he can. You know what I mean? Because he's sitting on more money than any other artist, and instead of overcharging people for it, but somehow the internet finds room to pick on him, and like Garth's just a good guy, trying to put positive stuff out there, and I'm cool with it,
All right, Corey, you're up.
All right. So again, no particular order. Queen, Eagles, John Legend, Leon Bridges, Nat King Cole, Joe Bonamassa, Chris Stapleton, the Lumineers, Sia, and then I got a whole bunch for 10, like Journey, Michael Bublé, Sam Smith, Sam Cooke, Elle King, who I love, who is inspired a lot by Elvis, Stevie Wonder, Bruno Mars.
That's a really eclectic list. And actually it's the second time John Legend has entered the conversation, which I overlooked the first time, but same thing. John's got a lot of feeling in what he does, a lot of really good lyrics in what he does. I mean, this is really broad to say this, but I would assume that music for you is very, very sentimental and probably connects to a time and a place for everything. Like somebody just doesn't throw out Queen and the Eagles in the same sentence as John Legend if you're not closely connected to something to do with their music. So I would guess, like, if you will zero in on the Eagles, I would imagine the Eagles is probably like a childhood memories.
Yep. my mom
thing
had
for
the
you, maybe not something that you just came into eventually. That
yeah, absolutely. My mom had the Hell Freezes Over album, and she was a recording artist herself. So I was always into whatever she was into. And that's where a lot of our music education came from, whatever she brought home and let us listen to. But yeah, eclectic and feeling and based on experiences.
yeah,
3, man.
I'm so excited. This is great. And what's funny is my wife and I we're going out to do a late night thing after this, and I'm going to tell her all the way there about how I hit 3 for 3 on this, and she's not going to care at all. It's going to be fantastic.
All right. So I wanted to do something similar. But I'm going to have you throw out some of your favorites. So we did at the end of 2019, we did an episode, or maybe a couple, I don't remember. We gave out awards for our favorite things called the middies. All right.
Mhm.
And we had all kinds of categories, video games, books, mobile games, sports moments, all kinds of fun stuff. But 2 of those categories were our favorite music album and our favorite artist, specifically of the 2010s. So 2010 to 2019.
Okay.
I'd like to hear you're going to get your own middies since you have a music show, and I'm vamping to give you a minute
Sure.
to think about specifically your favorite album of 2010 to 2019.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be award winning. It doesn't, literally just
Sure.
your favorite.
Just, yeah,
Nothing else.
who had the best decade?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then artist. So album and artist.
Well, I'll give one to. I was going to ask if I could have a 2-way tie for my favorite album.
That's fine. Go ahead.
There's
We
no
did.
rules.
No,
Yeah.
well, instead, what I'll do is I'll do one for artist and one for album for the 2 guys. And this was actually just mentioned, and I skipped over it on accident. But Leon Bridges' second record. I don't mind the first one, but the second album, Good Thing, is stunningly good. Like stunningly good. And there's an example of what you brought up earlier. I was at the record store to buy something else. I forgot what I was even there for. And I looked up, and I didn't even know that Leon Bridges had a second record coming out, and I blind bought it immediately. I was just like, well, based on the first one, I'll like this. Hadn't heard anything off of it, came home and dropped the needle on it. And I mean, from the word go, that record is brilliant from start to finish. And then the other one, probably my favorite artist that I've been turned on to in the last 10 years. And his third record is equally as good as Leon Bridges' second album, is Sturgill Simpson. He's got to be the most diverse record, the most diverse artist that came out in the last 10 years. I mean, his first 2 records sound like Merle Haggard would have heard him and said, whoa, that's too country. And then his third record is got like the Dap Kings play horns on it.
Yes.
And it's, you know, it's got some New Orleans in it. It's got some Motown in it. It's still got some Nashville in it. He covers Nirvana in the middle of all of that. Like, I mean, it's just and on top of that, it's a concept record, which, you know, growing up a Pink Floyd fan, you know, you're like, wait a minute, a country artist did what now? You know, like, you know, so, and that came from our music night thing, because when we play music and we invite people over, a friend of mine brought that record, and just the whole night was holding on to it and said, you got to hear this album, you know. And I hadn't heard of Sturgill Simpson, but never heard him drop the needle on that, and was just blown away.
How often does somebody bring music to that music night, which I love, by the way, that you do that, and you've not heard of them? Like, what's the percentage of times where you're like, I have no idea what this is?
Honestly, probably about 50%, because a lot of my friends are into a lot of different. My niece just came last Friday and brought 3 records, and I hadn't even heard of any of the 3 artists. And then I have another friend of mine, the same guy that brought the Sturgill Simpson record, is really heavy into not just punk, but like the garage scene that's out now, like guys like Ty Segall and bands like Fuzz. And so he's constantly bringing stuff that I've never even heard of, you know, and we work it in. And, you know, there's some things I like more than others. Like, he's a giant Weezer fan, and he keeps trying to convince me that Weezer's great, and I'm just never going to get there. I don't hate him, but I don't love him. And he's really convinced himself that he can climb that mountain, but I don't think it's going to happen. But I'd say probably about 50% of the time when people bring records, it's probably people that I haven't heard. And also because I have so much here, like people know they don't need to bring Floyd or, Aerosmith or whatever, because they know I already have a bunch of that,
I wonder if it's I wonder if it's a game, right? If I were coming over to your place for that, like for me, it'd be a little game. It'd be a Stump Russ kind of game.
Oh, it's definitely a game for the one guy. he also likes to play a game called Let Me See What I Can Get Away With Playing. Like if if I go to mixed drinks, or if I'm disposed with something else, he'll take over spinning, and then I'll come back and I'll be like, Dave Matthews is playing again. It's like,
Who brought Aqua?
Yeah. I've actually jokingly apologized to other people, been like, Dave Matthews would not be spinning if I hadn't gone to the bathroom.
Have you ever heard of Nightwish?
Oh yeah.
I was deep into Nightwish in the early 2000s, like that symphonic metal.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, all of that stuff. The 90s were a wild time. The 80s get so much love, and rightfully so, about how diverse music really was in the 80s. But if you looked past what was on the radio and being shown on MTV in the 90s, there was some crazy stuff going on that that a lot of people didn't really even. I was just on CJ's show, Podescue, the other night, and we were talking up a storm about different music, and we got into talking about German industrial real quick. That was huge in the 90s.
That's awesome. So we've talked about this on our podcast before, and the story starts with a shirt. It's a really comfortable shirt, and it's a Beatles shirt. And I don't even wear the shirt because I feel like I'm supposed to like the Beatles, but I appreciate who they are and what they did for music. But I just feel like if I wear the shirt and can't rattle off their like 25 of their songs, do you buy into this idea that there are artists that we're supposed to like?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, let me say, I know that idea exists. I don't mean I endorse it.
Yeah, okay.
For example, my whole life, I've been told that because I love guitar, that I just have to be a Jimi Hendrix fan. Mm-hmm. And I respect Hendrix. I don't mind anything that he did. Me personally, I like a lot of what I think Stevie Ray Vaughan took what Hendrix did and moved it further, and that works more for me. But my whole life, people, oh my God, I have friends that'll come over. Oh, I can't believe you only have one Hendrix record. Well, that's more than enough Hendrix for me. I'm good with that one record. And, but yeah, there definitely is that out there. And Floyd's one of them. Like Floyd, Zeppelin, Stones are huge that way. Like people just, it's assumed that everybody has to love the Rolling Stones. And there's artists like that with the Beatles. I could totally see people listening to the Beatles and not liking the music. But to me, the only real pre-requirement is you have to at least respect what they did for the art. And I'm not talking about the Beatles specifically, even the Stones. The way that the Stones did their business in the late 70s and in the 80s into the 90s really paved the way for how a lot of the aging artists now still do their business. And so I can respect that about the Stones, even though I like maybe a handful of their songs, So I always try and find a way to respect at least something like without Hendrix, we wouldn't have got Stevie Ray Vaughan. And I totally understand that, but that doesn't make me love Hendrix more because of that.
Mm. Yeah. Kendall, do you have I'm sure you have examples of that too, where it's like people make you feel like, oh, you don't love fill in the blank. And you're like, I mean, yeah, I get it, but no.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things like that for me. I mean, some of the things that you just mentioned. So, the Beatles would be one for me that I like the Beatles, and I mean, I had purchased a few albums because I felt like I should, and then I mean, listen to them a lot, but like never got the feels from listening to the Beatles, right? Mm-hmm. It was that way. I tell you what, one thing for me that can be kind of awkward is as a worship leader. Like I've never been a fan of contemporary of CCM music. Like I don't listen to it in my spare time.
Yeah.
when I do, it's like work for me. Like I'm just trying to figure out that's why like it in our church. Well, one of the reasons why we could go into theology all day long, but because that plays into it too. But like, I mean, if you turn on the local contemporary Christian radio show, like we're not playing a lot of the stuff that you hear on there. And
Sure.
Part of it is, I mean, it just so happens that that's not my jam. I do listen to it because I feel like I need to know what's out there, what people are listening to and are into. But yeah, I don't listen to really any CCM unless I'm trying to figure something out. So
Yeah.
I guess the same is true for art too, right? Like, because I appreciate what Andy Warhol did for contemporary art, but him painting a Campbell's soup can doesn't really do anything for me personally.
Right.
So I mean, it's true for virtually every, interest, but I just find that funny. It seems to be especially heated when it comes to music, or passionate when it comes to music.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I just can't. That one I've never done, even though I've always been such a huge Floyd fan. Like I've never said to somebody, "Oh, I can't see." Like, if anything in my life, I've always said, "Well, yeah, I can totally see how people wouldn't like Pink Floyd." You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like I happen to love it, but I can totally see how you wouldn't. But I like, for example, for being from Michigan, I am not a Bob Seger fan. I am not a Kid Rock fan, and everybody from Michigan thinks that you have to love those two artists. And I'm just like, well, then call me the exception to the rule, because I don't really want anything to do with either.
You have to be a Motown fan being from Detroit.
Oh, for sure. 20 minutes from my front door is Hitsville, USA. I can walk in and stand.
Yeah.
I can stand on the same floorboards where, I heard it through the grapevine, ABC, Dancing in the Streets, where all that stuff was recorded. How could you not? I mean,
what about ICP?
Nope. Nope. Nope, just not my thing. Just not my thing. I love me some Jack White. And I love sections of Eminem's work and MC5 and whatnot. But like, there's a couple of Detroit stalwarts that, like, Seeger's never been my thing. Kid Rock, Alice Cooper, I come and go with. Like, I don't love them just because they're from here, but I can't think of a Motown artist that I don't genuinely love.
Yeah.
Do you have a guilty pleasure artist that those that know you might be surprised? As varied as your playlist is, and as much as you have in your basement down there, somebody that you like secretly dig on that?
I would say that the one artist that probably surprises people more than anybody, because I am a huge fan of this band, is the Culture Club. Like, people just are like, really? And in most people's defense too, Culture Club for most people is at most a 3-hit band. For most people, they're a 1-hit band. And then if somebody's deep into Culture Club, they probably know the 2 other hits. Whereas like from Office Space, I celebrate their entire catalog. Like I have like all 4 of their records. I have their VH1 Storytellers bootlegged because it didn't even air. Like, I'm huge into them, and I think more often than not, people are like, "Really? Like, nice. Are you?" I think I have at least a couple of friends who think I'm playing some sort of long form joke. Like in 3 years or so, I'm gonna be like, "Ah, I was just messing with you. I don't even like the Culture Club." But yeah, I love that band. Another thing, I guess, that surprises people sometimes is that I'm a huge Michael Jackson fan, and I think sometimes that surprises people to a certain extent, like how much of his catalog that I know. But I mean, that's an extremely popular artist. I guess the more surprising of the 2 would be the Culture Club.
Well, we can't let you mention that without saying how great your episode with Taj Jackson was, his nephew. That was a really, really good episode.
That was that was a lot of fun for me. And what's funny is we've had a couple of really big interviews that we've been fortunate to get, and luckily for me, most of them have been on the phone, so that I don't end up, I can kind of displace myself and not, like, mentally not think like, you're talking to the drummer from the Black Crowes, like, whom I love, but with Taj Jackson, we were on Zoom, and he looks exactly like his father. So
Yeah.
the whole time I'm talking to him, I was just like, "You're Tito's kid." Like, like the entire time that I'm talking to him, it's just like it's like Jackson staring you in the face while you're trying to have this. And my whole point was I didn't want to come off as Chris Farley. Just do you remember Beat It? That was awesome. Like do you remember when he was like, "I'm bad," because that was awesome. So
meanwhile, we need to start up a campaign with Culture Club's manager to get like a 4K Blu-ray release of the VH1 special.
Yes.
We'll get an email chain going with Russ and make sure we get that out.
I want to get Boy George on the show just so I can tell him that he should calm down and stop making the band all about him. Anybody that will listen to me, I show him the latest Culture Club record that came out. It says on the cover Boy George and Culture Club, and I'm so mad about that. Like, it is not Boy George and Culture Club, damn it. And I would love to get him on the show just to be like, have a great interview and then end with that, so at least he hears it from someone.
Well, Russ, it's been an absolute treat having you on the show. I think in your very first episode of your podcast, you referred to yourself as the best salesperson for music, and I just love that you're that passionate about it, that you try to introduce people to new artists. And so we just want to give you the last couple minutes, like tell people how they can follow you, and if you're on all the socials, and the best way to connect with Infectious Groove.
Right on. Well, I appreciate the compliments. And, I was telling you guys earlier today via text that my wife never finds any podcast funny at all, including my own. She doesn't think anything we say on our show is funny. And we were out running errands the other day listening to your show, and she was rolling. Like, everything that came out of your guys' mouth, she was rolling. And she kept pausing it to like, when you're watching a movie and they'll pause it and someone will re-say the joke. Like she would pause your show to like retell me the joke. And I was like, I was sitting right here. I heard it, So anyways, the feeling's mutual, and I'm really, really happy and excited that you guys had me on. That was very nice. And it was a cool conversation. I'm glad I went 3 for 3 on the the music guessing. But having said that, to directly answer your question, the easiest way for anybody to find out anything about us is just go to infectiousgroupepodcast.com. But if you're hearing this and you want to quickly connect with us, Instagram and Twitter is really the most active place that we are. And both of them are, twitter.com/infectiousgroovepod, or Instagram/infectiousgroovepod. And I'm really, really active on Twitter. So if you get on there, you can find, pretty much anything about the show that you need to know just by giving us a follow on Twitter. Or if you want to look into any other way to connect to the show, if you just go to infectiousgroupepodcast.com, everything that you need to know is right on that one page. And, like we talked about earlier, our whole point is trying to spread positivity. And, if you've heard the show, like you guys said, you've listened to some of it, we do debate things. So it's not like we just say everything's all sunshine and rainbows. But I feel like we're trying to have an informed and intelligent debate regarding art instead of there's two things I don't want on the show. Number one, I don't want us just dogging on everything all the time. And I also don't want the three of us sitting around just going, "Oh, yep, you're right. That's a great album." Like I want an open discussion about things like that, because art is so personal. So again, I really appreciate you guys having me on. This has been a lot of fun.
Well, it's been our pleasure, and your wife's words are too kind. So thank you so much to her. And this has been a lot of fun for us. We will share the pictures of your awesome studio/basement with on all of our pages.
Sweet.
That's a very cool setup. Guys, anything from you?
That's it.
Yeah, this was good.
Take it out.
Fun.
Oh, and before anybody asks, because the number one question I get when people see the pictures is people say, "Are you sure that's not a record store?" No, I promise you, I just have the world's most forgiving wife. When we looked at this house and we walked into the basement together, my wife was like, "And your records could go over there," and whatever. So when you see anybody who sees these pictures, I promise you, it's not a record store. It's just my basement.
That's awesome. And a cool one at that. Thank you guys for listening. We will catch you next week. Stay safe out there. God bless. Scott Stapp.